Samuel Crawford stood on his weathered porch at dawn, the Texas horizon stretching before him like a promise he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. The sky burned orange and pink, painting the endless plains in hues that felt too beautiful for a man as broken as he was. His calloused hands gripped the porch railing, the wood worn smooth by years of restless mornings just like this one. Today was supposed to be different. Today, his mail-order bride, Margaret Williams, was due to arrive. After 5 years of grief and isolation on this godforsaken ranch, Samuel had dared to hope again. He'd sent her money for a train ticket, written letters filled with promises of a good life, and spent sleepless nights imagining a future where his house wasn't so silent. But as the sun climbed higher, a wagon appeared through the shimmering morning heat, kicking up clouds of red dirt along the dusty road. Samuel's heart quickened. He straightened his best shirt, a faded blue one he'd pressed with care, and ran his fingers through his graying hair. This was it. His salvation, but as the wagon drew closer, Samuel's stomach twisted. The driver wasn't the respectable woman he'd been expecting, with her neatly pinned hair and modest dress. It was old Pete Morrison from town, his weathered face grim as death itself. The wagon creaked to a stop, and Samuel stepped off the porch, his boots crunching against the dry earth. "Pete," he called, his voice rougher than he intended. "Where's Miss Williams?" Pete climbed down slowly, his eyes fixed on the ground like he was carrying news too heavy to meet Samuel's gaze. "She ain't coming, Sam. Got herself married to a banker in St. Louis last week. Sent this instead." Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs, a dull roar filling his ears. "Sent what?" Pete shuffled to the back of the wagon and pulled away a dirty canvas tarp. 7 children sat huddled together, their thin bodies pressed close like scared animals. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12, the youngest maybe 4. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. They stared at Samuel with hollow, desperate eyes that had seen too much for their tender years. A little blonde girl clung to the oldest boy, her matted hair falling over her face like a veil. "What the hell is this?" Samuel's voice came out as a growl, his hands clenching into fists. Pete handed him a crumpled piece of paper. "Found M at the train station with this note. Says they belong to you now." Samuel's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The words were scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. "Mr. Crawford, these children need a home. You wanted a family. Here's your chance. Don't look for me." No signature. No explanation. Just 7 pairs of eyes watching him, waiting for something he didn't know how to give. "I can't take care of 7 kids, Samuel said, his voice cracking under the weight of his own disbelief. "I don't know a damn thing about children. I was expecting a wife, Pete, not an orphanage." Pete shrugged, his weathered face unreadable. "They're here now. Whoever sent M paid good money for that wagon ride. Said you'd know what to do." Samuel stared at the children. They stared back, silent and still, the silence stretching between them like a chasm neither side could cross. The little blonde girl began to cry, a soft, keening sound that cut through Samuel like a blade. He thought of his own family, his wife and daughter, burned alive in a fire 5 years ago. He thought of the nights he'd spent drinking himself to sleep, the loneliness that gnawed at him like a cancer. But 7 children? How could anyone expect him to handle 7 broken children when he couldn't even fix himself? He noticed the oldest boy's hands, scarred, fresh wounds crisscrossing the knuckles like a map of pain. His eyes held a terror no child should carry, a wariness that spoke of horrors Samuel couldn't imagine. These weren't just orphans. They were something else entirely. For 3 hours, the children refused to speak. Samuel tried everything, gentle questions, offers of food, even a clumsy attempt at a smile, but they sat on his porch steps like statues carved from fear itself. The oldest boy kept his arms around the others, protective, his scarred hands trembling slightly. The little blonde girl had stopped crying, but her eyes remained wide and vacant, as if she were looking through Samuel to some distant nightmare. "Look," Samuel said, crouching to their level, his knees creaking from years of hard labor. I need to know your names. I need to know where you came from. Nothing. The oldest boy just pulled the others closer, his jaw tight. Samuel's patience frayed. He had cattle to tend, fences to mend, a life that didn't include babysitting mute orphans. I'm taking you back to town, he said, standing. There's an orphanage there. They'll know what to do with you. No, the oldest boy's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute terror. Please, mister. Don't take us back. They'll find us. Samuel froze. Who'll find you? The boy's mouth clamped shut, his eyes darting to the horizon as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. Samuel studied their faces more closely. These weren't just hungry children. They were hunted. The way they jumped at every sound, the way they positioned themselves to watch all directions at once, it was the behavior of prey. Something, or someone, had terrified them beyond words. Against his better judgment, Samuel brought them inside. His small ranch house felt claustrophobic with 7 extra bodies. They huddled in the corner of his kitchen, a tight knot of fear, while he rummaged through his pantry for something to feed them. As he heated beans and cornbread, his mind raced. Who had sent these children? Why him? He'd never mentioned wanting children in his letters to Margaret. Hell, he'd never even considered it until this morning. The little blonde girl tugged on his sleeve. When he looked down, she pointed to her mouth, then her stomach. Hungry. At least that was a problem he could solve. He set plates of food on the table, and the children descended on it like wolves, shoving beans into their mouths as if someone might snatch it away. Samuel watched, his blood running cold. The second oldest boy, maybe 10, had rope burns around his wrists. A girl with dark hair flinched every time Samuel moved too quickly. The oldest boy's scars seemed to pulse with every bite he took, as if eating was a reminder of pain. Jesus Christ, Samuel muttered under his breath. What happened to you kids? The oldest boy looked up from his plate, his eyes meeting Samuel's for the first time. Are you going to hurt us? The question hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. No. No, I'm not going to hurt you. The last man said that too, the boy said, his voice flat. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. What last man? But the boy had gone silent again, and the terror in his eyes told Samuel not to push. As evening approached, Samuel heard something that froze his blood, hoofbeats. Multiple horses, riding hard toward his ranch. The children heard it too. They scrambled to their feet, panic written across their faces. The oldest boy grabbed the little blonde girl, his voice urgent. Hide us. Please, mister. If they find us, they'll kill us. Samuel peered out his window. 4 riders approached, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. They were armed, their faces mean and hard, the kind of men who carried death in their hands. One of them pointed directly at the house. Whatever these children were running from had caught up. Get in the cellar, Samuel barked, grabbing his rifle from above the fireplace. The children scrambled toward the trapdoor in the kitchen, their movements frantic but silent, as if they'd done this before. Samuel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, as the riders stopped 50 yards from the house. The leader, a tall, thin man with a black hat and dead eyes, dismounted with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Crawford, he called, his voice smooth as oil. Name's Jessup. I'm looking for some property that belongs to my employer. Samuel gripped his rifle tighter, not yet raising it. Don't know what you're talking about. Jessup smiled, the kind of smile a snake gives a mouse. 7 children. Runaway workers. They were seen getting into a wagon headed this way. Workers? Samuel's stomach turned. They're just children. Children old enough to work. Children worth good money. Jessup spat into the dirt. I can do this easy or hard, Crawford. Your choice. Samuel's mind reeled. Slavery. In 1885, 20 years after the war, someone was still buying and selling human beings, children. "There's no children here," he lied. Jessup nodded to his men, who began spreading out around the house. "See, that's where you're wrong. We tracked M here. My employer doesn't take kindly to people who steal his property. They're not property. They're human beings. They're whatever I say they are." Jessup's hand moved to his gun. "And right now, they're coming with me. Dead or alive makes no difference to the pay." A scream pierced the air from behind the house. One of Jessup's men shouted, "Found M. Rabbits hiding in a hole." Samuel's heart sank. The cellar had an outside entrance he'd forgotten about. Jessup's grin widened. "Well, that settles that." The oldest boy burst through the front door, his face streaked with tears. "They got Emma. They got the little ones." Behind him, one of Jessup's men dragged the blonde girl by her arm. She was crying, fighting, but so small, so helpless. "Let her go," Samuel snarled, swinging his rifle toward the man. "I don't think so," Jessup said, his gun now drawn and pointed at Samuel's chest. "You just made this personal, Crawford. Nobody steals from Ezra Blackwood and lives." Ezra Blackwood. Samuel had heard the name in whispers: illegal mining camps, timber operations, places where workers went in and never came out. Now it all made sense. These children were slaves, and Blackwood's men had come to reclaim them. Something inside Samuel snapped. He saw his daughter's face, burned alive 5 years ago, superimposed on the little blonde girl's terrified eyes. His rifle fired before he'd consciously decided to pull the trigger. The shot caught Jessup's man in the shoulder, spinning him around and freeing the girl. She ran to the oldest boy, who pulled her behind the porch railing. "Bad choice, Crawford," Jessup roared, diving for cover behind a water trough. Bullets flew, splintering the porch around Samuel as he dove for cover. Jessup's men were closing in from 3 sides. "There's 6 more in that cellar," the oldest boy shouted over the gunfire. "They'll kill them if we don't do something." "What's your name, boy?" Samuel called during a lull in the shooting. "Tommy." "Tommy Harris." "All right, Tommy. You know how to shoot?" "Yes, sir. They made us hunt for food at the camps." Samuel slid his pistol across the porch. "There's a window on the side of the house. Watch the cellar door. Don't let them take the others." Tommy grabbed the gun, his hand steady despite his age. More gunfire erupted. Samuel counted Jessup's shots, reloading. He charged the water trough, catching Jessup off guard. His rifle but cracked against Jessup's jaw, dropping him. But the other men were closing in. Tommy's pistol cracked from the window, hitting one in the leg. Another appeared, and Samuel's shot took him down. 2 down, 1 wounded, Jessup unconscious. But Samuel was bleeding from a graze across his ribs, and his ammunition was low. Then he heard more hoofbeats. 6 more riders approached, their faces as hard as Jessup's. Samuel's heart sank. They were outnumbered. Jessup stirred, blood dripping from his jaw. "That'll be Blackwood's men," he grinned. "You're dead, Crawford. And those children are going back to the mines." Samuel looked at Tommy's scared face, thought of the 6 children in the cellar, and made a decision. "Tommy, get them to the barn." "What about you?" Tommy called, "Buying you time." Samuel grabbed his last box of ammunition and took cover behind an overturned wagon. The new riders hit his property like a cavalry charge. He fired, dropping one, but they were too many, using his outbuildings for cover. A bullet grazed his head, and his vision blurred. Then, impossibly, a bugle call echoed across the valley. Hoofbeats, organized, disciplined. Through the dust, Samuel saw blue-uniformed cavalry, at least 20 soldiers, riding hard toward his ranch. They hit Blackwood's men like a thunderclap, and within minutes, the shooting stopped. The cavalry captain, a weathered man with kind eyes, approached Samuel. "Samuel Crawford?" Samuel nodded, dazed. "How did you know?" "Telegram yesterday. Someone said you'd need help protecting some children." The captain handed him a folded paper. This came with it. Samuel's hands shook as he read the familiar handwriting. It was from Margaret Williams. "Dear Samuel, by the time you read this, you'll understand why I couldn't come. 3 weeks ago, I discovered Ezra Blackwood's child slavery operation. I've been working with the army to gather evidence, but these 7 children were in immediate danger. You were the only man I trusted to protect them. The cavalry was to come if they didn't hear from me by today. I'm sorry for the deception, but their lives depended on it. Please give them the family they deserve, with love and respect." Margaret. Samuel looked at the children, now gathered around Tommy. "What happens to them now?" he asked the captain. "Up to you. They're free, legally. But they need a home." Samuel met Tommy's eyes. "What do you want?" "We want to stay together," Tommy said. "They split families at the camps. We promised we'd never be separated." "All 7? "Yes, sir." Samuel thought of his empty house, his lonely nights, the life he'd planned that would never be. Then he looked at these children, Tommy's steel, Emma's trust, the quiet girl's unspoken pain. "All right," he said. "You stay. But you'll work. You'll learn. And we'll be a family." The little blonde girl, Emma, smiled. "Does that mean you're our daddy?" Samuel knelt, pain shooting through his side. "Yeah, sweetheart. I guess it does." As the cavalry rounded up Blackwood's men, Samuel walked his new family around the ranch. The twins laughed at the chickens, the quiet girl watched the horizon, and Tommy stayed by his side, already a leader. Margaret's letter had changed everything, but as Samuel watched these children begin to explore, he realized they'd changed him too. His house wasn't empty anymore. It was the start of something beautiful.